Junkyard Love Podcast.
At what age do we learn how to have better?
It's a real,
Junkyard Love Podcast.
it's kind of a dichotomy. I ended up in Nebraska. That's where I'm from, trying to get out of Nebraska by joining the Navy. And I joined the Navy to be a radar air traffic control specialist. And through mistaken orders, I ended up at the SEAL Training Center in Coronado after I completed air traffic control radar school. And when I got there, they talked me into volunteering for the SEAL program. So that's pretty much my life in a nutshell. Every time I kind of think I've got a strategic plan or an idea, gamed out, some opportunity, a window opens up. And I won't say it's a gut instinct, but sometimes I can just see it for what it is, especially if you're looking for it, which is something I talk about a lot in my books and my speeches. If you're open to it, it's kind of like punch buggy. As soon as somebody plays punch buggy, you suddenly see Volkswagen Beetles everywhere, right? But up until that point, you didn't see any because you weren't thinking about it. You weren't aware of it. So that's the same thing with opportunity. So my life is more of a zigzag of jumping through windows of opportunity. I was enlisted a SEAL for 10 years. Then I decided to become an officer. So I was an officer for 10 years in SEALs. And then I went to manage money, as you noted in the intro. And then 9/11 happened. And then I got pulled out of the money management thing after 8 years into counterterrorism, using some of my old skills for the U.S. government. And then I ended up in a large government contracting company, and started doing basically business management of operations. But then I got pulled, because I was pretty successful at marketing and growing my division. I got pulled into being the business development, marketing, corporate communications guy for a $1 billion company and about 7 subordinate companies. So, and I wasn't that person. I didn't have that training. That wasn't my background. But all of a sudden, I was trying to figure out how to pitch and position aviation companies and vehicle companies and digital and virtual training companies, all kinds of odd mixture of these different entities. And initially to try to figure out how to position them, everything from their brand awareness and position for success. But then I got sucked into the operations of the companies. So just because I said yes and went into that particular position, I ended up with about 2 or 3 years of being the doctor, going into a company to look at their marketing piece, and suddenly I'm getting pulled into everything. Marketing, but distribution, production, their staffing levels. Do they have a strategy? Do they have any kind of planning at all? And that actually became my forte for quite a while. It wasn't so much what I started with. I ended up segueing into this whole other piece. So that's just kind of how my life happens. The books, same kind of thing. I decided I was going to write a science fiction novel when I wrote it, and decided I was going to donate all the proceeds to the SEAL Veterans Foundation, and then I ended up writing 3 more science fiction books, and then 5 SEAL novels, and I finished a 10th novel about 2 months ago, which I'm shopping to agents. And somewhere about 4 years ago, I started writing business books, basically because I thought that would be interesting, and it also would be helpful if I wanted to be a consultant or a business coach, executive coach, et cetera. So,
Yeah. Okay. Well, it sounds like you kind of life is stumbling you into positions that you're fit for in some way. Tell me more about this. So, at the beginning, you had a different intention, and then you ended up at the SEAL's office. I'm drawn to use the word intuition in here too. I want to explore more of that. How
yeah.
did you just follow these little instances to listen and start talking to certain people?
At 17 years old, well, just about 18, when I showed up in California, and I didn't know anything about the SEAL teams. Back in those days, it was totally classified. There were no movies, there were no books, nobody knew anything about them. So I really went in there thinking they were going to figure out how to fix my orders and send me to a ship to be a radar guy. And being, basically about 18 years old, I was very malleable. So it was very easy for this gentleman. Very nice guy. He didn't lie to me or anything, but he just started asking me questions, and I answered him. I wasn't intimidated by him. It just sounded like a really fun thing to do, the way he laid it out. And he actually, he'd ask a question like, Well, did you ever play sports, like team sports? Yes. What did you play? It was about basketball, football. Oh, so you were in football. Did the coaches ever yell at you when you weren't performing correctly? Oh yeah. Well, that's how the instructors are here. If you're not performing, they're trying to do the best thing. They're helping to coach you and get better. So they'll yell at you and everything. Did they ever punish you if you didn't do something right? Oh yeah. Well, what were the punishments? Oh, we have to run laps or run up the stadium stairs or something else, or do wind sprints. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's the same kind of thing here. The punishment is really a reinforcement of what they're trying to teach you. So it made it sound like I was going to football camp, right? And then, do you know how to swim? Yeah, I swam competitively for 8 years. Oh, okay. So you're okay with the water. Oh, yeah. And by the time he was done, I thought, well, hell, this seems like a perfect fit for me. It wasn't like I had this intuition or I didn't have a sense of the universe of myself yet, for sure. But I think I was always had an awareness of it wasn't something developed, but I had an awareness that something seemed right, like a fit. And having gone through 17 weeks of air traffic control radar school, and I did that because my dad did that in the Korean War in the Navy. I'm not a tech guy, although I sit on tech boards, and I'm not a electronics whiz or anything. But I had to go through some electronics schools for that other vocation. But I knew that didn't seem as fun as what this guy was saying. So it's kind of like signing up for prisoner of war camp and not realizing you think you're signing up for soccer camp or something.
Yeah.
But it did change the course of my life in a really big way.
Yeah, hats off to that recruitment guy. He did his job really well relating relating things that you've experienced to potential futures you could see in the military. Okay, so
Yeah.
as you started working with these other people, you were saying that it sounds like became the person who had all the answers in some ways. It sounds like you just were an incredibly useful mind to have around, and they were floating you to where you were best used. What was that all about? What was that like? Did you intentionally come in with like I'm gonna have a bird's eye view on this and have kind of a little bit to say about everybody's individual or jobs or I guess how did that start?
Well, let me talk about how that ability kind of developed. So again, part of kind of being, what my pitch is to be creative. You have to be open-minded, and you have to take risk. You have to kind of jump through that hoop and see what's on the other side. And maybe it's not perfect, and maybe it's not even that great, but you gain an experience. And Louis Pasteur has this quote: "Chance favors the prepared mind." So it's kind of like the thing that luck is when opportunity meets hard work, kind of a thing. It's one of those kind of deals, but it's true. So, and I've taught my kids. I have 5 kids, all grown. I taught them the same thing. There's no bad job. That bad job, that bad boss is teaching you what not to do if you're ever a boss. It's teaching you how to communicate better than that boss. You have to suck every bit, every ounce of information, intelligence about the world, life, workplace, working with the coworkers, maybe the business that you happen to be in, and then you're going to move on because this is trauma if you're a 16-year-old kid working in a fast food place, and then it's trauma when you're 26 years old and it's your first big job, and it's trauma when you're 44 and you just got laid off. It doesn't change because we're all human beings. So I learned early. As a kid, I worked in lots of different jobs. I detasseled corn. I baled hay. I worked in a warehouse. For one day, I manned the high pressure hose in a meatpacking plant. I was too late to make that work, so it was a one day job. But you learn what you're not good at too, right? So what you end up with, if you kind of see life that way, is you're kind of like this snowball that's rolling down the hill and picking up everything that's on the ground. The snowball is getting bigger and more powerful and more capable. And you've got it reflects all these different dimensions of the path you took. And that makes you a better problem solver because the open-minded approach and all this kind of disparate, goofy experience that isn't aligned with a course or a certification makes you very, very comfortable with the unknown and very, very comfortable with a scenario where all the assumptions are not there laid out perfectly in front of you. And also operating with parts of those assumptions being missing completely, and then you have to make the decision and take a leap of faith. So if you have a life like that, which is kind of how I started, and the SEAL teams kind of think that way too. The creativity is driven that way. Open mind, throw all the whatever you did before, the formulas and everything, get that out of your head because every mission is a separate problem set. and you're going to get in big trouble if you keep doing the same football play over and over again. Even if it's successful 10 times, it's the 11th time it's going to blow up on you. So look at the problems in real time, assess the information in real time, have lots of contingency thoughts about what happens if this doesn't go through or that doesn't happen, or the weather's different. So that just reinforces what I said through 20 years of that kind of experience and training. So it was easy when I get into the business scenario I outlined. I didn't go in there thinking I was going to be a business doctor, like bar rescue or something. I thought I was going to go in there, look at their website. I was going to look at their marketing materials. I was going to see what are they doing for promotion, because that was my job at the time. And when you start talking to business owners of smaller companies, they start confiding in you about all the other elements of the business. Because it all ties, right? If you don't have enough money to run an ad, I better tell you why I don't have enough money. And that leads to I can't sell anything, or that leads to my product sucks, or my service sucks, or my competition's kicking my butt. Next thing you know, you're sucked down the business 101 rabbit hole, and you end up being a mentor and a coach and a consultant for the whole sweep of issues, all the categories, because they're all intermingled and they're all related. And I was actually solving problems that were fixing things that had nothing to do with my primary purpose. And then people I worked for said, hey, there's this other division that's having problems, and the big billion-dollar organization. I want you to go into that division and I want you to do an assessment. So now all of a sudden I'm the business doctor after 2 years. But it was a ramp up and a learning curve. And it was me learning to not try to solve everything right away, but to listen and hear what all the issues are, because I didn't know anything about aviation, not the art of buying planes or fixing planes or moving planes across the planet logistically. I didn't, so I couldn't give them an answer right off the top of my head and be a know-it-all. I had to sit back and just absorb.
So what do you think it is, if you had to pinpoint, one solid sentence or two of what it was about you at that time? Like what did you have that it seemed that other people did not?
Two things. The open-mindedness. Because if you're open-minded, if you're intellectually humble, it's amazing how much stuff you see. It's like the punch buggy thing all over again. You see things clearly. You see things even the people that you're talking with don't see because they're too close to it. I'm on boards of technology companies because I have an objective viewpoint, because I don't know anything about robots, or I don't know anything about high-speed drone operations. So I'm the one person in the room that goes, hey, you got a booger hanging out of your nose, because nobody's looking for that. And that's valuable to a lot of people, that they have somebody that actually sees the truth. But to do that, you have to have an open mind. The second thing is, and this happens with experience, but also that experience is formed by being comfortable with taking a chance, with taking a risk. Because if you're so risk averse that you've mitigated all opportunity away, you're just stuck in the ground. You're not going anywhere. The world's swirling past you. Everybody else is changing. You think you're safe because you think your job is to mitigate and make everything perfect. Well, guess what? Your product, your service, the way you run your company, it's all changed. Maybe everybody in the neighborhood. I've got a friend that had a training school, and it was fantastic because it catered to kids. After a decade, the revenue started going down. The headcount started going down. And he wasn't sure why. So he threw money into advertising. And it turned out that where he planted that school was perfect when he put it there, because the demographic of the surrounding 5 to 6 mile radius were parents with kids in elementary school. And then the kids, as they were shifting from elementary school to middle school, were flooding his school. But as they started to get into high school, right, and the opposite was happening. And then if you took it like another 5 years later, he's surrounded by empty nesters. So the entire he served the population, but they had evolved and left. So he basically had to shut the school down there and find another location like that. But it happened so slowly that he had no conscious awareness that it was happening. And so, you have to be able to take risks, but you also have to realize that, trying to mitigate those risks can actually cut off your opportunities. So those are two things: ability to have an open mind and be intellectually humble, coupled with risk taking.
Yeah. Well, it seems, I mean, change is actually a pretty profound, change is even a continuous learning process for me, y- a lot of like kind of my world in this podcast has been, it started from me trying to learn about myself. And I had some mental health things that I was like, man, I got to get this stuff figured out. I've got to understand how my own mind works. And that's a pretty profound fact, is learning about change. You think you're going to get to this arrival point of like, I'll learn about who I am and exactly why I am this way, and then it'll be that same way until I'm, 95 years old or whatever. But no, it's every day you kind of have to accept who you are that day. You have to accept, in every different transition in all of your lives, when you start a new job, when you get into a new relationship, any of the stages of our life, we kind of have to take account, uh, who am I? Why am I this way? And is it serving me going forward? Because sometimes we're understanding ourselves, we're learning about ourselves, um, but we but there's not necessarily an arrival point. I feel like I found that a lot with myself. There's not necessarily a place where I get to where I know myself 100%. I'm continuously learning about myself. I wonder, in your world, Marty, what do you see in other people? I mean, you've worked alongside a lot of other people. I mean, I would love to hear what your own experience about it is too. What happens when people start to try to change? What are the frictions that come up when we want change? What are the things that are difficult for us to look at about who we are now and that need changed? I guess, I suppose, what are some things that come up commonly in your world when it comes to people trying to assert change in their life?
So there's a lot of brain science now that has identified kind of the primordial original intent of the brain to keep the human species alive. And there were two things. One was stability and safety, essentially full mitigation of all risk. You don't want to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, and you want to be able to find food all the time, right? And stay warm and all those kinds of things. The second thing was the willingness to take risks and explore. Because if you didn't do that, in the first case, if you were living in a valley, you'd eventually kill all the deer, eat all the fruit. Everything would be you'd denude all possible food sources, and then you would starve to death and die. So you had to be compelled and be willing mentally to pick everything up and take it into the unknown, over the hill. And there's actually two switches in the human brain that they've located that are functional parts of the human brain, which is part of what I write about in Be Different, because that allows you at any age, unless you have a medical problem, to be creative, to take chances, to think big, to have a sense of awe and wonder. We just been taught not to do that as adults. That's not an adult thing to do. 6-year-olds, that's okay, but not adults. So that, I think, is a premise to my answer to your question. If that's the way we're designed, and if in modern times, say since the late 1800s, mostly through public schooling, we've been conditioned to not take risks, to hug safety and stability as the be all end all. The objective is stability and safety. Then what happens is we are leaving ourselves open to greater and greater and greater emotional and psychological shock when that reality turns out not to be reality. Madame Curie, who discovered radium, has a quote that says, "The universe abhors stasis." In other words, the universe hates stability. And she's saying, because she was a scientist and she realized everything she was looking at was in a constant state of turmoil and change and adaptation and evolution or de-evolution or complete destruction, and just disappeared. And she goes, okay, then I'm going to stop trying to contain this and control this and codify this and catalog this, because that's not the way the world works. So if you think of what I just said and take your question, and there's two people in a room and they hear, hey, the company is going to reduce the staff by 10%. Well, usually what I tell my people, because I've been a CEO for now 15 years, everybody's about to communicate change. I say, what's the first thing everybody's going to flash in their mind the second you start to talk and you send out a communication? What's going to happen to me? So the best thing to do is to front load what's going to happen to you. You can start off with all kinds of windups. we've had a strategic retreat. We did this and that, and the markets are changing, and they're all going, they're hyperventilating because they're waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? And the longer they have to wait, or the more vague your communication, the worse the outcome is going to be as far as their mind's concerned. That's because any change, even before it's announced, and maybe it doesn't have anything to do with you, any change is perceived as a threat to their stability, their security, their stasis. And it could take it even down a notch. You can go to accountants and linear kind of trained professionals, or they do this all the time. You go up to an accountant and you say, hey, I want you to be part of a project team that's going to be develop pricing for a bid we're putting in. And if they've never done that before, they break out in sweats, they go pale, and they stare at you because all they see is failure because they haven't done it before. Because what they're good at is incremental repeating of rules and laws related to accounting. And they went to school for that, and they were attracted to that. And what you just basically said is, I want you to go in there and show your ass and look like a fool, and then you'll never be the same again as far as we're concerned because we'll remember how bad you were. They think it's like you're going to go in there and film them doing karaoke or something. That's the psychological reaction. So if you don't hire people with a more comfortable mindset, a willingness to work with other people, a willingness to roll with some of the changes, and you've got to really interview for that kind of temperament, right? If you don't do that, what you have is you've actually, on purpose, brought a whole bunch of fragile mindsets into a room. And the only thing that hasn't happened yet is you haven't announced your first change, because then once you do, you're going to get what you bought, basically. That labor force is going to react how each individual reacts, and the majority of them are going to get freaked out. Now, of course, the opposite is true. If you bring in a bunch of people that have been identified as open-minded, comfortable with some change, willing to work in project teams, multidisciplinary groups, well, then what's going to happen is when you start talking about change, a lot of them are going to think this is the opportunity, and how can I help?
Mhm.
So that's a lot of prep stuff, environmental stuff. It doesn't matter. I've never been able to control every single hire that's come into groups that I've been put in charge of. And so you have a mixed bag of all those types of people. Some of them step up and go, what can I do to help? And some of them are in the corner in the fetal position. And some people have already dialed up, a headhunter, I need another job. I think I'm going to get fired. And nobody's even announced anything about firing. And you get the whole gambit. And all you can do afterward is try to manage everybody's psychological reaction. Now, the more you've been through that, the more you're kind of a veteran trooper of those kinds of experiences, you build up psychological resilience to the moment. And you still may pick up the phone and dial your headhunter, put them on standby because you're not sure how this is going to turn out, but you're not necessarily going to go into panic mode.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does make sense to have a plan in that moment, but, you know, I think we all deal with potentially making things worse when they don't need to be as big of a deal as they currently are. I wonder in that moment, I think about the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset a lot. I'm sure you have like some great examples of those, but I think that it's something that can be learned. Like if you think of someone with a fixed mindset, maybe they're kind of always been a certain way. I don't think that it's a death sentence by any means. I think that it's an active thing that we can invite ourselves to do, and see where we're being in a kind of a fixed mode of wanting comfort and safety, but life or whatever, is inviting us to have a growth mindset. I think it's something that people can change into. In those moments, especially when there's big changes happening at corporations and in places that you're working at, what do you see? Because it seems like you have a pretty natural growth mindset. Do you see other people with fixed mindsets? Is there like some linchpin that you can give them that opens them up from a fixed set to a growth mindset? Um, I know my questions are a bit rambly, Marty, but I hope
No,
there's
no,
something that I can hand to you.
no, they're fine. So we're talking about behavior, and we're talking about modifying the behavior for a particular purpose. In this case, to be able to have more of an open mind and a less reactive, negative response to some kind of an announcement or change or something, and a more proactive and positive reaction, right? So behaviors are all about training, coaching, mentoring. I'll give you a perfect case in point. If everybody that's listening to this, unless this is something you're practicing all the time, just stand on one foot and time how long you can stand there before you lose your balance. Now, there are hundreds and hundreds of little muscles and tendons and ligaments that are involved in stabilizing your leg, including all the bones of your feet and your own mind, the way it perceives its sense of balance. And you may find that you can't keep it up. You can't balance for more than like 5 seconds. But is that your human constraint? Does that mean all humans can only balance on one foot for 5 seconds? Or is that a self-imposed constraint because you've never practiced? I guarantee you, if you practice that a little bit every day, randomly, you get a sense of what the stability feels like when it's right. And you do that for 30 days, and you probably have a 2-minute, 3-minute balance period, which, if you like numbers, the percentage of improvement is exponential, right? It's the same thing with this kind of human behavior. It's practicing and flexing and exercising all these other types of thoughts. The open-mindedness is a huge one, because if you don't have open-mindedness, you won't take on the training. You won't listen to anybody. You just block it out, which again is kind of that stick in the mud thing. You're trying to protect yourself from the risk of change, because in your mind, all change is bad. All change leads to karaoke night. And you have to have it as a cultural thing. You have to have your leaders thinking this way. Again, this is a big part of creating and establishing and sustaining a culture. You have to do it at the hiring point. You can't just hire people that on the resume can do exactly technically what you're looking for. And if you do it in a panic because you're just trying to fill a hole and you're bypassing all these human behavioral, what do you call it? When you're compatibilities that you really need in a culture, then you're just bringing in a problem. You're bringing in a psychological grenade that's going to go off down the road. They're not going to help with a group project. They're going to react violently to every little piece of new information. So you can control a lot of this by how you hire, and then you need to improve upon it by evolving everybody through this kind of mindful behavioral transformation from wherever they are to a comfort level with change, and there's ways to do that. You can do it through scenario-based training. It's a game. It's role playing. You get in a room and you say, "Hey, we just lost our number one supplier. We just lost our top salesperson. We just lost our biggest client or customer." Now, these are real things. I have 5 kids, and some of them, they're in different businesses, but this pops up all the time. "Hey, we just lost our number one client." Excuse me. Management team's freaking out, right? It happens every day in business. It happens in small businesses and large businesses and middle-sized businesses. Somebody moves in across the street and sets up a pizza parlor, and you've got a pizza parlor, but they've got more room and they've got more money to throw at advertising, and they're putting everything at 25% off, and they're having a kids' night or Monday night football night. You're caught behind the curve, right? That's the way the world is. That's that whole point of the universe constantly changing, because you can't see everything, but you have to anticipate things are going to change. And gaming this out, sitting in a room, either doing it as an exercise and brainstorming all the possible things that could go wrong and all the possible opportunities that might be out there with your team. The more you do that, the more everybody opens up and starts throwing something into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do it once, because everybody that thinks, again, it's that karaoke night thing. They don't want to look stupid in public. They'll just sit there and clam up. You'll get 1 or 2 people that are just real comfortable with flapping their lips and everything, but that's 2% of the input potential. So you have to cultivate it. You have to hire for it, and you have to maintain it by mentoring and doing these practice drills. That way, when the real thing comes up, and this is how you do it in the military, you train harder. At least, SEALs for sure. We train much, much harder for combat than combat tends to be.
Hmm.
Right? If we push ourselves harder and we have more things fall apart, and the radio is broken, now how do you get to communicate? Or the helicopter never showed up to pick you up. Now you have to walk, 15 miles through mountains or sand, whatever. If that happens to you all the time, and then you go to do the real mission, and everything works, and the helicopter shows up on time, you go boom, 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 and you're out. It's anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Because you train to a much worse set of probabilities.
Mhm.
You can do the same thing in business. You can do the same thing in family. Your family can even do this.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I have experience. A lot of my work is in. I work in live event production, and I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations that do leadership training. So, if you ever heard of like HOSA or DECA or FBLA, they're like high school leadership
Mhm.
organizations. They do a lot of mock trials and like mock competitions, and it was very profound for me when I was young. When I was originally enrolled in DECA in one of these organizations, just having that mock interview, like the first time you go in and have an interview, just shaking someone's hand and introducing yourself and being offered a problem or trying to sell yourself and tell them why, you're worthwhile for them to hire you at this job, whatever. Um, Doing those mock competitions a few times made me just so cool and calm and collected when it actually came time for real job interviews. It took away the anxiety. And so, yeah, it totally makes sense. It's, you run 15 miles with a 25-pound weight vest, and then the next time you run that exact same time without the weight vest, it feels pretty light and it's
Right.
no big deal. So, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty profound. Setting people up in these positions to where they're not shocked when something that is inevitably gonna happen, happens. What do you so I wanna talk about discipline. How do you see discipline? I think that's probably an ever-growing factor. I liked I'm sure you're familiar with, like, Jocko Willink.
Yeah.
He has the popular saying, "Discipline equals freedom." It's a short, simple thing, but it's a great one, man. I think that's a pretty profound one. So I guess I wanna just open that door to you, Marty. What do you think about when I say discipline, or how do you think about discipline that may be different than the way other people do?
Well, I think people overcomplicate the discussion of discipline. The problem with discipline is it's simple, but it's so candidly difficult that everybody gets about halfway or 25% of the way there and realizes how hard it is, and then they stop. So I'll give you an example. So with the novel I just finished and the three business books, I got 13 books. And they're most of them around 90 to 95,000 words. So that's 13 times 95,000 words. And if I tell somebody that, they're like, how the hell did you ever do that? And I did it basically about 200 to 300 words at a time per day, which sounds not like a big number. But if I did it for 7 days and I did it for the next 7 days and I kept doing it until the book was done, then I've created a set of behaviors that become habits. And those habits repeated over and over again to get the result that you're trying to get, which in this case is incremental momentum and movement through a project. That is the definition of discipline from the outside looking in. Everybody looking at me says, "Oh, he's so disciplined. He gets up at 5 in the morning. He starts writing at 5:30. He always puts down at least 300 words. And he's doing it every single day. Bam, he's got a book. Bam, he's got another book. He's so disciplined." Yeah, okay, fancy word. What it really means is doing whatever it is has to be done over and over and over and over again to get the result that you're aiming for. It may be nothing more than getting up and not watching, looking at your screen on your phone. Psychologically difficult. People have a really hard time with that, right? I've turned my phone off or left my phone places and walked around and had that same freak out everybody has. I'm missing all this. I mean, I know a CEO and I got all this other stuff. Somebody's calling me. Somebody just sent me an email that I have to respond to. And you experience the freak out and you go, this is how bad I am right now. This is me not having this thing in my hand, right? But if I did that every day, if I gave myself 3 hours or 4 hours of the day that I'm awake, where I don't have this thing like in front of my face, in time, the discipline of doing it over and over and over again, repeated behavior to achieve a positive result, reduces my anxiety, eliminates my anxiety, and suddenly I realize I'm coping without having to look at the stupid phone, which was the end state I was aiming for.
Mhm.
You want to lose weight, you want to gain weight, you want to get bigger biceps, you want to run faster. I mean, there's physical limits to physical goals, and there are maybe some limits like I can't dunk a basketball. I'm just too short to dunk a basketball. Um, so you have to look at what your objective is, and before you start watering down the objective, set the objective and give yourself a reasonable amount of time to reach it. and then break it up into these little mini steps. With the SEALs, that training technique was called baby steps. Little tiny baby steps to achieve each element or increment of growth, whether it's knowledge growth or whether it's skill attainment growth. It's a, eat an elephant one bite at a time kind of thing. And if you do it that way, and I don't know how you were at math, I sucked at math, but whenever I had a math teacher that taught that way, I was never left behind. Whenever I went into a class, like the next year, and the guy went, and the next day he jumped to the next concept. If I hadn't picked up the day before's concepts and been able to practice them and figure them out, I was a day behind or the concept behind. Next thing you know, I'm halfway through the school year and I'm way the hell behind because that teacher didn't care. They didn't teach in a way that was incremental and reinforcing. That was a discipline of learning and then evolving into the next concept and then evolving into the next concept. They were just throwing it out there and say, execute. So you can't do that to yourself either. You can't set a goal and say, I'm going to achieve that goal in leaps and bounds because that's not the way we learn. And that's not the way we change.
Right. Right. Yeah. My chemistry was that for me. It felt like I missed one day or I was like nodding off one day or something. And like you said, before you know it, halfway through the semester, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I feel I can't catch up. But yeah, I liked it a lot. It kind of reminds me of Dr. Jordan Peterson. He talks about sometimes it could be so daunting to look at the giant staircase of like, what you want to accomplish or what needs done to get to where point A to point B. But it can also be easy for some of us to kind of like cripple our own responses of doing anything if we're too much staring at the big staircase. So he talks about just, hey, if you can't write your novel this morning, what can you do? You can go into your office desk drawer and you could take a piece of paper out and put it on the desk. Cool. Maybe that's all you got today. And then tomorrow you grab a dang pen and you put it on there. Maybe you write the first sentence, maybe you don't, whatever. But it was really helpful for me, man, because sometimes when you have all these like creative, amazing, cool ideas, you're like, that's awesome. I want to attack that. I want to go on that. I have this excitement. I have this momentum. I have this motivation. I want to attack this thing that I know I'm going to be good at. I want to write this book, whatever it is. And then we realize, we only have 24 hours in a day and your excitement doesn't match what you're actually able to do in that day. So rather than just sitting down and accomplishing nothing, keeping that momentum going. I feel like it fits into what you're talking about with the snowball analogy, to where like you run into different things and they just become your snowball. I think what happens often with a lot of people is we hit those things, and instead of keeping the momentum of our snowball, we got to stop and check out what we just ran over, and we got to define ourselves by that.
Or you
And
pick it out of the snowball because you can't see why we have any value. We toss it out to keep it clean and pure and safe. And
yeah, exactly. Okay, so what separates us from, or I guess what keeps our momentum as the snowball? How do we notice when we've been stopping to take our report card? I say that often, like, we want, like, how am I doing right now? Who am I right now? Does this define me as a whole? And we give our letter number grade, and sometimes it's defeating. So how do we keep the momentum of the rolling snowball, I suppose?
I'm an advocate of pull versus push motivation. And so push motivation is you're either threatening yourself or somebody else is threatening you with some downside consequence if you don't push forward and move forward and keep doing everything to some volume of completion. And then if you don't do that, then you feel like you're starting to fail. It's like the chemistry thing. You're falling behind. It's all on you. What are you doing this for? And you just stop, right? But the pull motivation approach is you think long and hard about the end state. You think long and hard about what you want to do, what you want to be, how you want to look. This could be a personal thing. It could be a professional thing. It could be if you're a company, it could be what do you want the company to look like, or your division or department to look like. And then you have to solidify that out there on the horizon, kind of like a light, and you're in the desert or you're in the frozen tundra and you see that light. And what happens is you're compelled, you're motivated to move physically, psychologically, emotionally in that direction. And of course, it takes forever for that light to look like it's gotten any closer or any bigger. But you're being pulled towards that light, and that light is your objective. That is the cleanest, purest, and I think the most powerful motivating factor for people. the problem is there's so many programs and there's so many books and there's so many, infomercials and all that. And it's more about pushing you. It's pushing you towards something and you haven't even really defined whether you want to go there yet. So if you don't want to go there, you're bound to fail because you're not going to incorporate all the little micro behavior changes and the disciplines because you don't perceive the value yet, or there is no value for you. So somebody else can't set a goal for you. Like you're going to be a lawyer. So you're a sophomore in high school. I want you to get good grades. I'm going to ground you because I want you to be a lawyer. You know how that works. And if you look at the statistics of how many people quit the first year of law school, how many people that actually graduate law school never actually go to take the bar and go off to do some other thing in industry. It's amazing if you saw it. I mean, mind numbing. It's kind of sad because you're thinking, well, if those people quit the first year of law school and they quit right after they finished law school, they probably never really wanted to be lawyers.
Yeah.
So who decided that? Who made that their goal? Parents, family members, peers. So, yeah, push doesn't work, and it's probably a cliche in any profession. If you get in your third year of college and you realize you never really wanted to go to college, it was your parents' dream, or you never wanted to be work in the family business and take it over. That was your parents' dream, and you just kind of stop one day like Forrest Gump and go, "I'm done." And you wasted all this time sacrificing to achieve somebody else's goals. So figure out the goal. And, if the goal is just next week, that's fine too. I was talking about before the baby steps. You basically set the big goal way out there. And you say, okay, I think it's going to take 2 years. You don't go crazy. If it was going to write a book, you say, okay, it's going to take a year for me to finish the first draft. Okay, that's 12 months. And then you say, all right, so if I got 12 months, then that's, 52 weeks. And you start breaking it down into the time chunks. And you say, so I basically have to write 500 words a week or something, And that means that I've got to write 100 words a 5-day work week, or, 67 words, a day for 7 days. And then you say, well, I can do that because you broke it down into the increments. And so your short range goal is to get to the end of the month and have achieved whatever that count is. It'll feel like slow motion later, but in the beginning, it feels like it's taken forever. Because once you get used to the habit, then you feel like the increments they're too small and the short-term objectives are too short, and you can actually do a lot more because now you're getting into the pull part of it. You're getting sucked in. You actually start to get the confidence that and the courage. I can actually do this. I'm in month 2 and I've written this much, or I've built this much, or I've achieved this much. My 1-year goal is achievable. I can do this. One step at a time. I can get that done. But you have to have that big goal at the end. I can't remember what it was, the big audacious goal. There was a book, business book back in the 90s, I think. You have to have a big audacious goal for the organization that is worthy of sacrifice and worthy of that disciplined behavior change and repeated activity.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what do you think about, I suppose this might be aimed towards more younger people, but I think we all probably have our own instances of it throughout our life. You were just talking about, what we want to do versus the voices of our parents, the voices of our influences. I think sometimes, I definitely find in this world of kind of the mental health, self-development, self-help, you know, setting scenario nowadays, kind of like this whole self-help world. I think a lot of people come up against that is they get to a certain age and they realize, man, I have a lot of momentum towards things that I don't truly want to do. I did not realize it until I was 28, but I was trying to please my mom this whole time. And now I got to reset and go, what do I really want? What do you think about, or what has come across in your path, Marty, and even for you as well? Those times where we notice, oh geez, I've been working towards someone else's goal. I need to reset. I need to take stock of what I actually want to do. Yeah, how do we kind of find our own centers, I guess? How do we take those moments, settle, reset, and align with our values, not our influences?
So I work with a lot of military people that are transitioning out of doing, a 20+ year career.
Mhm.
And it's a culture shock to come out of uniform because that's a very fixed culture, and their expectations are unrealistic because they haven't been a civilian for so long and they don't understand what it's like to have a job. And you got to do something pretty bad to get fired in the military because everybody's trying to train you to be the best person you can because you're part of a team and we have to rely on you. So there'll be a lot of effort put into correcting whatever the issues are to get you at least to the medium standard, right? So unlike the regular world, if you were failing, there may be nobody that cares and nobody's going to try to help you, and you'll fail to the point they'll just get ready and replace you. You're like a bad car part, right? So they're used to a loyalty system, and they're also used to this audacious end state goal or objective. So they train hard and passionately, and they're pulled towards these things because it's God and country. It's to protect the United States citizens. It's all okay. Now they get out and they're working as the regional manager of Walmart. No God and country.
Yeah.
Decisions aren't related to the loss of
Where's the
life and
meaning?
limb.
Yeah.
Everything's diminished. The pull part feels like it's not there. It's just a job. It's just a paycheck. So you feel like you're just stuck in paying the bills mode, where you used to have this life. And then the other part of it, because patriotism kind of waxes and wanes in U.S. history. But for the past 10 years, at least 12 years, since 9/11, if you walked in uniform in a bar any place in the United States, pretty much somebody would buy you a beer, say thank you for your service. It wasn't always that way. It wasn't that way for the Vietnam guys. It wasn't that way for the Korean War guys. It was definitely that way for the World War II guys. And so guess what? You don't get all that big love hug kind of stuff going on every day when you get out. So nobody really cares. I actually have a presentation that I call "Thank you for your service. Now what?" And it's a shock to these guys into the fact that the flag and the medals and the box and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like the trophies from high school football or swimming or whatever. Are you still walking around saying I'm the first string left pulling guard on the varsity team? No, you aren't that person, and that's no longer what defines you. You kind of put this in a place in your mind. This is a part of my life that I did great things and I was successful and I was respected, and now I'm going to put that where it is. I'm going to use all the skills that I attained and all the knowledge and wisdom and all that, but I can't go from being a fighter pilot or squadron commander and go right into being a Fortune 50 corporate executive. It's not going to work that way. So when you look at anybody and they have to transition from who they are to some other kind of person, they have to first, and this is kind of back to that intellectual humility thing, they basically have to sit down and say to themselves, I've got to shred myself of all this negative and positive baggage. The positive baggage is important too, because if you think you're the bomb diggity be all end all, then you're arrogant. You're arrogant about what you think you are and what you're capable of doing. And if you're really arrogant, you think you can do it anywhere. Kind of back to the fighter pilot thinking they can be a Fortune 50 executive. You're a Olympic boxer and you think you can go and be a swim coach, or you can be, the head of a restaurant. They're totally different things. It's like I can speak Chinese. I'm going to go ahead and speak Farsi too, just because I can speak Chinese. It's lunacy. But psychologically, because we want to hug what we know makes us feel good and feel stable and feel loved and accepted and respected, we tend to think it's going to be a horizontal transition to the next big thing. It's not. So what I usually explain is you have to create this apprentice mindset, and don't jump off of your day job before you've done the research and put in the work to figure out what you want to do next, because it takes time. And that's what I tell the military guys too. I said, you got 6 months to a year and you're going to be retiring it out. That's where you start going out there and whatever you think you want to do, learn everything you can about that particular thing. You'll find that you don't really want to do it, or you really do want to do it. Then how do you want to get involved in it? So research that. Talk to people. People will help you all day long. You want to run a restaurant, restaurant owners and operators will tell you, they'll help you out. But you have to get into a mindset that I'm an apprentice in this new thing. I'm not the master. It's not a transition of I'm the fighter pilot, I'm the Navy SEAL, and I'm the Army commander, and suddenly I'm in charge of all restaurants just cause. And what I'll say to these guys in the uniform, I would say to anybody, if you are honest and you think back to whatever you're doing now, that when did you start and what was it like in your first week or first month or first year? What didn't you know? How many mistakes did you make? Think through that learning curve. That's the learning curve you have in your next new thing. You're not going to start out kicking ass and taking names. You're going to start out as an apprentice. Now, like I said earlier in the interview, if you've been smart and you've absorbed all these different weird kind of things that you're learning, you're in the trucking distribution business and you want to go into the oil industry. Well, they're both linear movement of product. So there's a lot of things you learned over here that are transferable, and you dealt with people and you dealt with technology and you dealt with time and space issues and weight and load issues. Well, you have the same thing over here. So there are things that'll transition over, but you don't know how to sell oil or you don't know how to do all the calculations. So you're not an expert yet. So be an apprentice as much as you can. Start studying before you go make your leap. In the military, obviously, there's a date certain. If you're not, then it's the same thing I tell my kids. I tell everybody, give yourself 6 months to a year to go from not knowing anything, going through the apprentice mode to where you think you've got a pretty good handle on what you need to do. Get the certifications you need for this new thing. Save the money you need for whatever you're going to need if you have to do a startup or something like that. You can even go out and work in some of these industries for free on this, in your spare time. And don't come in there and say, I want the corner office, I want to observe everything. Come in and say, can I work on the loading dock, or can I work out as a busboy, and then can I go back and work as a fry cook? Can I want to see the whole operation because I want to start my own restaurant. See, and that mindset, you're going to get there. You're going to evolve, and all the totality of all your other experiences and knowledge and capabilities will all come with you, and you'll be better than the average person because you have all that. It's kind of like a booster rocket
Yeah.
to help you with your success.
Yeah, yeah, and I imagine it's, after that first few weeks or first few months of the initial learning period where you're just kind of figuring out what you don't know, after you really kind of get what do they say, like a hip in your get up or whatever the saying is, like you feel comfortable with where you're at, then your access to all your old info and all the other skills that you have are able to like have a place. You found comfortability and you found kind of your place in the hierarchy at your new spot, and then now all of your other info can find its way into that new job. I was thinking about there's this dude called Simon Sinek. He's a leadership
Yeah.
motivational. You've heard of him? Yeah, he's
Mhm.
great, man. I've loved his books. Leaders Eat Last is one of my favorites. But he talks about, I think it's in that book, how he was a speaker at this event. Um, and he was kind of the main speaker, the main keynote one year. And they got him a car, like picked him up from the hotel. They like brought him his own coffee. They like handed it to him. And he was a speaker and he's like this important guy, right this way, Mr. Cynic, blah, blah, blah. And then the next year, he wasn't the speaker at the event, but he was just going to the event. And he talks about the difference with his basically like name tag wasn't there. He wasn't the speaker. Nobody sent a car to pick him up. He asked about coffee and they're like, yeah, there's maybe like some day old coffee in the back, get it yourself type thing. And so he was just kind of talking about, I thought it was really profound how he pointed out the differences between, you don't really get to take your name tag with you in every room you walk into. You kind of got to start from,
Right.
and it's a profound lesson. It's probably a lot of humble pie that people got to eat, throughout.
There
throughout
is. I had the same experience. I was in Atlanta last year, and I did a speech to a big business organization, 1,800 people. And it was supposed to be 1,600 seats, but they had 200 standing in the back. And when I came out, they had a guy following me with a float camera thing, and there was rock music. And I came out, and it was like 4 minutes of just cheering, just like, you know. And I don't normally do venues that big, so I don't really know what it's like to be, Axl Rose and come out like, the lead guy in a powerful rock band or something. And I just stood there kind of like, oh shit. And then I said, okay, I'll just go ahead and start. And when I got done, the same thing, and they're all reaching up to shake my hand. So I'm going down the thing like I'm Elvis, shaking hands and everything. And they did the same thing. They picked me up at the airport. They limited me to the Atlanta Hilton. I get in there. They'd already prepped everybody, and there were 2,000 people at this conference. So they all knew my face and everything already. This was the day before the speech, and people running up to me. Security had to help me get into the elevator because there was too many people crowding around me. And I called my wife and I told her about it, and she joked. She goes, "Who did they say you were?" Like they said I was, something else, And so then, I I have the meeting with the executives and all that stuff, and then I go and I do my speech, and I'm done. And the next morning, I go to the airport, and my flights are all screwed up, and I end up sitting in Atlanta for 12 hours, and I'm just some dude on a plastic seat. And it doesn't matter who I am. I'm not going to get anything done. The name tag is the name tag's gone. And my wife goes, "Well, that's just the universe telling your ego to just, shrink back down to
Have a
normal."
seat. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's reality. And it's kind of like what I was saying about if you're a Navy SEAL or a fighter pilot, you got all a chest full of medals and all this stuff. It's really a big fall from grace in a way. It's the reason why so many military people have trouble getting out. It's the reason why professional athletes that have spent a considerable amount of time as professional athletes have a real difficult time transitioning when they get out. I mean, they're walking out there and they're the center of attention. Everybody in that town knows they played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Every restaurant they walk into, people are like running up. They're like rock stars, right? And then a year after they get out, yeah, it's a big mind game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that moment is, it's funny. I come at it with this kind of silly comical side just because I've experienced my own versions of it, in my different jobs and as I'm getting, just involved in different environments. One year I'm the important guy and the next I'm, nobody knows I'm there, whatever. I think that the transition is, I don't know. I know I'm kind of sounds like I'm poking fun at it, like it is kind of silly, but it's actually deeply painful. It's actually deeply to like come to a point in our lives, male or female, where we have to reinvent ourselves suddenly. Like the end of a chapter, the end of a book closes, and it doesn't have to be necessarily sorrowful or sad or a loss necessarily. Then we have to reinvent ourselves, and we have to now insert ourselves into this new hierarchy where, just a week before we woke up in the morning, we knew where we sat in the hierarchy. We knew what we had to do every day to prove that. We knew what it took to feel fulfilled when we laid our head down, and now we've got to restart that. What I don't know, anybody going through those transitions, I suppose, what advice would you have for them, Marty? What someone who and I guess I may be speaking to the people who are having a hard time with this. They're having like genuine sorrow. They're having trouble finding this new version of themselves. Uh, what do you think you would talk to them about?
Well, if this sounds kind of like Yoda or something, but and I mentioned intellectual humility. So it's great you have a spike in self-esteem in an event that you're the center of the universe, um, and there's something to learn in that. But mostly it's you experience it, especially if it's a positive thing. And then when it's all gone, even if it's only going to be gone for a period, but maybe you never have that experience again, then you have to basically clear your mind and be humble and realize there's something to be learned by. I mean, you can learn when you're laying on the ground after you fell. You can learn while you're up running and looking great. You can learn in almost any situation. You just have to be aware. You have to be aware that, and back to what I told my kids when they were first going into jobs, and everything that's happening to you, good or bad, is a learning experience. It's the school of life. So if you aren't sure and something comes up, I'll pick up the phone and call me. But I guarantee I'll squeeze some value out of it that will help you down the road. And you won't remember it, but when you're 20 or when you're 30, you're going to say someday, you know what, that thing that, yeah, guess what? It's happening here. But it's not a shock to them because it's part of life. It's part of human nature. It's part of whatever. So if you take what life gives you and you accept it and then learn from it, which sounds trite, but I mean, really accept it and really learn from it. And not, I'd go through the emotional of, I'll never be that big a deal again. Or, wow, I am the big deal and I'm going to be that way every day. You know, that's not reality. Deal with the reality in the moment and learn from it and the circumstances in the context of the moment. And like that big speech I mentioned, or having a chest full of medals after 20 years. Thank you for your service. Good job. Now what's next? What do you got for me? What are we going to do next? Don't rest on your laurels. You can appreciate them, but don't ride them into the future thinking that that's going to give you some kind of a pass on reality. It doesn't. The universe doesn't care.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff. I mean, that's again not easy, but it's valuable. It's useful. I work in a lot of realms of I like a lot of Buddhism stuff, a lot of Stoicism type stuff, and acceptance is something I'm always learning. It's not easy, but it's a constant reminder. It's a constant daily thing of acceptance. Cool. Yes, I did serve that. Yes, I did accomplish those things, but now it's time for a new chapter. Let's accept that. Let's not dwell on where I was and how upset I am that I'm not there anymore. You know, the sun still came out today, and what can I do today? So, yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff. Man, I wanted to ask you. There was a couple things that you said in your book that just kind of made me want to ask you about just freedom in general, freedom of speech, freedom of thought. You kind of had like a mention about cancel culture in there. I think that's kind of a fun thing to bring in. I suppose just broadly, man, what do you think about why is freedom important? What does freedom mean to you? And I'm definitely thinking freedom of thought too, not just like the law freedom. I think
Right.
my ability to think of whatever it is that I'm thinking of is involved in that. So I suppose just big old circle that for you. Freedom question mark, Marty. What comes to mind, man?
So there's a lot written on this and the power of your mind and the power of being able to think freely within your mind and range far and wide without ever physically moving. So there's lots written about the pilots that were kept in Hanoi Hilton during Vietnam for many, many, many years, and how they stayed alive, but really how they stayed sane, how they used their minds to basically live a life that was worth living and to contemplate all kinds of things and to make it day to day. Viktor Frankl, in his book on Man's Search for Meaning about his time in the Nazi internment camps, same thing. And he points to those that were able to be free in their mind as opposed to those people that took the consequences and interacted only with the consequences and got so depressed that they ended up basically dying of depression. You know, they basically died because they couldn't handle the circumstances, where the people that survived understood the circumstances and then said, okay, the rules were different. I'm no longer a banker. I'm no longer this. I'm no longer that. I need to learn this universe. I need to learn these rules in this place. And then I have to become a master of these rules. I have to stay alive. And the best way to motivate yourself in those situations is to help other people around you, because you stop thinking about yourself all the time. So those are mind games, but they're important mind games. And it's a freedom of the mind. So if you're sitting in a cell in Hanoi, or you're sitting in a cell in Nazi Germany, if your brain's not defeated, if your mind is not defeated, then you're not defeated. So those are extremes, right? And as extremes, they're great because they show that if you're physically constrained and you think you're constrained in other ways, financially, uh, uh, geographically, whatever you think your constraints are, your mind isn't. So you can conceive of almost anything and work it through and storyboard it in your mind and play it 5 different ways, color it any color you want to color it, stretch it out, shrink it down, compress it, add players, take players out. You can do this all day long as you realize that your mind has the freedom and the capacity to do that. And that is actually a really positive thing. And humans are unique of all species on this planet to be able to do that. And that's imagination. That's creativity. That's using a sense of wonder um, and taking a not knowing and trying to convert it into some understanding and knowing, all without getting out of a chair. So if you can do all that in your mind, then you could probably handle almost anything that comes at you, as long as you have the freedom of intellect to deal with it intellectually. I don't mean like academically intellectually. I mean like applying your brain and the mechanics of your brain. What as I mentioned in the book is that we've all been told we can't do that. We've been told not to do that. There's very little reward after you're about 6 or 7 years old to think freely, to dream, to wonder, to awe, have a sense of awe. If you raise your hand when you're 14 years old and say, I think I want to be an astronaut, the social reaction is going to be almost immediate. And you're going to say, oh, and then you go home and you say, I want to be an astronaut. And your parents want you to be a lawyer. So immediately it's going to be, pound, 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 pound. They're going to pound that astronaut thought out of you and get back on track. This is the only thing you're supposed to think about. So your intellectual freedom starts to get compromised, and you start thinking that that's the only way you're supposed to think, like an adult, and like a sober adult, meaning you're not supposed to think paying outside the lines. The path has been set. Go to school, get good grades to get into another school, get good grades to get a good job, get a good job, stay there, keep your nose clean, have tenure, you'll start advancing up the ladder, and then you retire someday. It's that linear American dream thing. But when you look at the people that everybody talks about when they talk about the American dream, it's not those people. It's the risk takers. It's the people that take chances and think big and act big and fail and get bankruptcies and start all over again. And usually they come from other countries because they don't know that there's a linear plan. So they just go for it, right? Because their mind says, I have nothing to lose. And I don't have a preset battle plan. My parents didn't say to do it a certain way, and society didn't say to do it a certain way. So, and that takes when you find your time you're an adult and you're sitting there and you're your first or second job and you're at the conference table and somebody has a problem and you raise your hand, everybody looks at you and you don't have the right title. You don't have enough time at the company, and everybody just looks at you like you have 3 heads, and they don't call on you because you haven't paid your dues yet. That suppresses and compresses your impulse to think big or to be creative or to even participate in problem solving. These are not mechanical brain problems. These are not human constraints. These are constraints of society and all the constructs that society has put around us. And, I make a point in the book. That's why I think, the cancer culture thing, and it may be over by now, but that is a social reaction, but it really looks like the same thing that I just said. It's don't think a certain way, don't talk a certain way, and there was a time where, don't dress a certain way. When I was, like in the late 60s, 70s, if you wore jeans to school, you were in trouble.
Mhm.
You had to wear, chinos or something. So these things were imposed on you to stop you from expressing yourself, but they weren't about breaking laws. The freedom we're talking about isn't about you want to be able to do whatever you want to do, however you want to do it physically and impact other people. This is about intellectual freedom and the freedom of the mind. So yes, I'm a big advocate of it. I think it's something that's it can be relearned within adults. I think it's back to the other things we're talking about. It takes a little bit of practice to build the habit to not react immediately by constraining and containing your thoughts and conforming, but to instead, take a shot, put the hand up, and then that they don't call on you, go ahead and say it out loud anyway. And if you're in an organization where they just keep stomping on you and everything, find someplace else to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. What a great answer, man. I think about that a lot because I spend a lot of time in the world of creativity. I do a lot of some sort of musician. I do a lot of artistry stuff, writing, poetry, whatever. And so I spend a lot of time contemplating what it really means to have free thought and how amazing it is that we have it. Like how cool it is that I'm able to sit in my apartment and think about and talk about the things that I'm able to talk about. The fact that I'm able to record this conversation and I can kind of collectively say whatever I want. I mean, that's pretty cool. Well, so, Marty, we're getting up here in time. I would love to just kind of round us back on your latest book. Um, I found that one thing that I really loved about it was I think just as a quick thought, my brain doesn't accompany military with creativity or like being rebellious and joining the military. But I feel like you laid it out in such a nice way. It kind of changed my perspective a little bit. In your book was very enticing. So I would love to just kind of at the end here, just for anybody who's listening, who's kind of thinking about checking out your book, who's your book for? What are kind of some mindsets that you would like to who would you like to attract to your book, I suppose?
Well, the first two books were focused more on organizational issues, like being able was about leadership and crisis, and be visionary was about strategic thought and development of the strategic thought into an actual plan of action. Uh, the be different, especially the subtitle of how Navy SEALs and entrepreneurs bend, break, or ignore the rules to get results, is kind of what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. It's I saw that, the first two books are useful to business leaders. It doesn't have to be a profit business leader. It can be an organizational leader. But what was missing was, and in working with these technology firms, there's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of rapid prototyping and innovation, a lot of experimentation, which means there's a lot of failure. And it's a mindset related to leading edge technology. But they're human beings that are exercising these things. And I'm watching them. Why are we doing that in the clothing business? Why are we doing that in the car business? Why are we doing that in the medical business that I'm in? Why are we just kind of stuck in the status quo? And it's because we're missing this creative engine, this willingness or the comfort to exercise and practice creative thinking. And then that's where I started getting into the conformity thing. I found some research that was done proving exactly the same thing. They tested kids from like 6 years old to 40, and their creativity score went from like the high 90th percentile down to like 5%. And it was almost a 45-degree decline. And then I thought, okay, so it's going to be based on age or something. They said, no, it's based on the amount of exposure to institutional learning and institutional management.
Hmm.
And it was exactly, and I had already written the book, first draft, when I read the research, and it basically confirmed that the first couple of chapters of my book focus on, which is this obedience, the blind obedience, conformity, and compliance, intellectual compliance. And they said, that's the problem. They're not allowed to think anymore. They're not allowed to dream. They're not allowed to do all these things. So that was cool. And I thought, all right, so what the book's going to be about is to tell people it's okay to paint outside the lines. It's okay to think differently. But to think differently, you have to basically convert yourself and be different, because you're going to have to change your whole mindset about life and work. And yeah, there's going to be, it's a little bit about your mindset about risk, because being creative and innovative is a big risk-taking endeavor. People are going to not like what you say. There's going to be a social cost to it. Small social, like in an organization, or big social sometimes. But if you start looking back at all the people that we point to and say, wow, they're so creative and so innovative, or they were so brilliant. Einstein was like 21 years old when he came up with the special theory of relativity. Alexander conquered most of the known world before he was 30. Tesla, I mean, almost anybody you point to, we see pictures of these guys, especially in the last 100 years, as old men, because that's when cameras and photography and film, like Ford, those guys look like the little men. But they all invented and created what they created when they were in their 20s. And the reason they're such icons is because they did what other people weren't doing or wouldn't do. So we've been talking about that theme through the whole conversation is, set your goals, create an incremental plan to achieve those goals, focus on the goals and let the goal pull you there. And the book basically tells you to do that, but also to allow yourself and to train and prepare yourself to think and then act and be different as a result.
Hmm. Yeah, what a way to wrap it up, man. That was great. I love that. I had this my like 10th, 11th, and 12th grade in high school. My drama or theater teacher, he would always say, "Dare to be different." He was kind of the first one to impose that on us, and it stuck with me. I feel like I use it as um, this little bit of encouragement in moments where I'm like, "What am I doing? I'm being weird right now." But it felt like the right thing to be done for me. It felt like something that I could do. And I looked around. Clearly, other people are not thinking the same thing as me, but it feels like it's the right thing to do. So I'm going to act on it. And I never regretted acting on things like that. So, um, wow, Marty, man, I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate this. I want to thank you for the most recent book. I think I'm gonna have to crack into your other ones too as well. I'm kind of curious to read your. So you have uh, so you have nonfiction books and fiction books. How many nonfiction do you have?
3.
Three, and then you have nine other ones.
I have 9 published novels, and then the 10th one that I'm shopping to agents right now.
Okay, anybody who's kind of interested in checking out your novels, what do you think is like the first one you'd probably send them to?
Oh, well, if they like science fiction, it's called A Time for Glory. And thanks, go to martystrong.com. The 2 fiction series, the books are at the bottom of the landing page, and also the covers of the 3 business books. So if you click on that, it'll take you right to the information or point of sale. Um, the first sealed book in the series is called Death Before Dawn. And both books takes a kind of naive young person and evolves them through the series until they're a much more evolved and more powerful personality. Not necessarily perfect or anything, but you get to track how they evolve over time.
Yeah, cool. It sounds like it hits on the old hero's journey. I'm always a big fan of that. Cool, man.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much. I will definitely include all of that info in so we'll be able to click on your link and everything below. So listeners, check that out. And then just the last thing, I'm just kind of curious, what do we have coming from you in the future? It sounds like you're definitely someone who, chips away at it day by day. But do you have anything on the horizon we could be looking out for?
I actually don't. I think I'm going to start writing some articles just to keep warmed up with writing. The When you write a book, you're kind of in it deep, and then you finish it, and then you have to start. I use beta readers, so people that are interested in sci-fi or people are interested in whatever the genre or topic of the book is, to read chapter by chapter and give me feedback. I do the same thing with the business books. I got a group of CEOs and people that have a lot of the business experience who give me feedback chapter by chapter. So I do a stream of consciousness writing in the first draft, and then I go back and I look at all the input by chapter of 3 to 4 beta readers, and sometimes it's mechanically good. You know, the character was left-handed in the second chapter, and now they're right-handed in chapter
Oh, right.
15. Little weird things like that. Sometimes it's my voice, like in the business books. I've shifted from my books are very conversational. People said it's like a mentoring program, and definitely on Audible when you listen to it. But if I start to get too technical and it starts to sound too textbooky, I get called on it by those guys. And I've had to rewrite an entire chapter because I shifted into technical writing mode, and that's more like, here's the information instead of kind of weaving back and forth like a storyteller, teacher, guide, which is the way the books are written. So, but when you're done with this inputting all that information, that's your second draft, and then I get it edited by a freelance editor, and that's the third draft. And so you pretty much you don't even remember why you wrote the book by that time, and you're kind of like numb. And then if you publish the book, like my business books for sure, the publisher wants to wait 8 months when it's ready so it can get on all the worldwide distribution systems and all that. And so it just sits there in pre-sale for 8 months. And then when it actually comes out, it's been 18 months since I started to write it.
Yeah.
So what I've had to do with the business books, no kidding, is I was on a lot of interviews for the first book, Be Nimble, and they were asking me questions because they read the book. And some of them had the book all, marked up and everything. And I'm like, I just finished Be Visionary. I'm like, what the hell did I say in Be Nimble?
You're like,
'Cause
I
it was
wrote
2.5
that? Oh, that
It
sounds
was
pretty
two and a
good.
half years ago. Or like, oh, that sounds pretty smart. But, but then we had comment, why did you say that? So
I
I
have no
went
idea.
back. I went back and I got the Audible version to start listening to in my truck. I did that, and then I did it with Be Visionary, and I just pulled down Be Different for the same reason. because you move on, you evolve,
Yeah.
and so I don't really have a new project because I'm just kind of numb from the finishing this 10th novel and in the search for an agent.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure there's novels being worked on every day in some subtle way though within your mind, man. I'm sure that's going on. Well, 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 cool, man. Yeah, that's really cool. I'm looking forward to hearing whatever it is that you do come across next. I'll be sure to follow you on social medias and all those sorts of things. You and I will be in touch, Marty. As far as listeners, I hope you're having a good day. I hope you're drinking some water. I hope you're stretching a little bit. I hope you're challenging the way that you've been thinking. And yeah, click down below if you want to check out more Marty stuff. I recommend his newest book. I like it so far. And yeah, I thank everybody for your time. Marty, thanks so much again, man. We will be in touch, and I'll let you know when this thing's releasing and all that. So thanks again. I
Thanks,
really appreciate your
Jacob.
time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Cheers, man. Merry Christmas to you too as well.
Same to you.
Take care. Bye, everybody. Knowledge is power.
Reality is. Junkyard Love Podcast.